Hey there, this is Perch. So, kids, in the previous video I just did that played yesterday, I talked about, but I just did really like 5 minutes ago. I talked about kid content and why this is a market that's just both massively underserved and massively misunderstood. So, as I mentioned, if you're making content for a child, kid, young adult, no, not young adult, let's say pre 14, so very young adult, young adult, that is a group that has proven over and over and over to have, if you can hook them, if you can produce material that is for them, you will find not only a very willing audience, a very committed audience, and one that does not have nearly enough content available for them. Take a look next time you're in your Walmart or your Target and go to the little book section, and you will see a lot of books for, I'd say, under seven, kind of, reader books, things that are, helping people learn how to read and getting kids into that. And then you'll see a handful of books for young adult, kind of like Twilight Junior. And then in the middle there, you see a very confusing collection of coloring books and activity books and just very odd content. It feels awkward, and if you pick up and you read some, you'll just notice that there's just not nearly enough material there for a group that is become comfortable with reading. Definitely is starting to have some opinions of their own, things they like, types of media content that they want to consume, but not a lot of content for them. And then you'll find that there's a couple um, books and series and comics and other things that are just look like they're running the table. You've got the Dogman and the Captain Underpants books that are just, you'll see just huge collections there of material that sells incredibly well. And it's not the most, I mean, this isn't Shakespeare. It's, but it's definitely hitting that market exactly where they want and at a really aggressive publishing schedule. I mean, Pilkey puts out, a fraction of the books that the publishers put out and makes an insane amount of money for that. I mean, there is no comic that comes remotely close to Dogman in terms of sales, not even remotely close. And the same thing is true with Raina Telgemeier, of just somebody who dwarfs, these publishers. And these are people who do not have, decades and decades of publishing experience and IP that they can pull from. They're relative newcomers, and yet they dominate. And I mentioned in the previous video, and I kind of will want to hit upon the topic again. Kids will take these titles and they will keep and hold on to them for long after they're kids. And it's these things that are the basis behind how collections and other things get started. I think one of the big tragedies right now in comics is that there is no solid title that appeals to this group. And if there was a really good concerted effort going toward them, this is the next 30 years of buyers. So take, if you will, for example, the Ultimate Universe. Think about the Ultimate Universe, but truly appealing to kids, appealing almost to Teen Titans Go level audience, but actually for kids. So one of the traps I think that comics falls into is that the people who write and create content for kids, like the Marvel Superhero Adventures or these kinds of titles, in many cases, they're written by the same people who are writing the older books. And I don't know if it's just so tempting or it's impossible to resist or whatever it is, but they will insert little in jokes, Easter eggs, gags, things that are going to appeal to the adults. When Pixar did Toy Story, there was these reviews that came out that talked about how Pixar had really nailed making kid content where there were still little gems in there for adults that adults could watch them and enjoy them as well. And I remember a lot of people misunderstood that compliment or that analysis. what they took from it were like the sneaky little like wink, hey, here's a joke that the adults will understand. And you'll see some of the DreamWorks and other films, Boss Baby and stuff like that, that are telling these jokes for adults in the context of a kid's cartoon. Sometimes they pull it off, sometimes they don't. Usually they don't. That's the dirty secret of a lot of this stuff, is that it doesn't land a lot of the time, and when it doesn't land, it's super awkward. It's uncomfortably bad when it doesn't land. And so, but the true compliment was of Pixar is that there was such effort put into creating a deep, emotional, well balanced, well crafted story, very similar to the Studio Ghibli work and a lot of the Japan animation and manga, where it was a kids cartoon, it was appropriate for kids, it was a movie that fit that audience, but there was emotional weight and there was complexity and there was care put in the story that adults would appreciate it and value it. And that is when you're hitting it perfect. That's when you can appeal to both markets and you get the crossover and life is great. But most people screw that up. And in comics, it's definitely screwed up. I think take a look sometime at the Marvel Rising book that went out. I defy you to explain who is this book for. It's really hard to tell. I'm usually pretty good at being able to pick up a book and say, all right, this is for this demographic, this is for this demographic, and this will appeal to this person, this will appeal to that person, and the people don't all have to be me. This is one of the aggravating parts of social media. It's like if it doesn't appeal to me, then screw you. I'm pissed, and that's just obnoxious behavior. But when you can't tell who it appeals to at all, then it's confusing. And Marvel Rising has kind of claimed that it's trying to appeal to the comic, not the cartoon, but the comic. It's to a teen audience, primarily more female, is the market they're going after. But if you read this story, it's like no, nobody would like this. I mean, pick up Smile, or one of the Tellmeyer books and read it, or even, God help you, pick up Scott Pilgrim in some areas and read it, and then pick up Marvel Rising, and you'll see them attempting to do jokes and shenanigans and different scenarios like uh, Smile, but completely failing. It does not fit at all that audience, and yet they keep going back to it, and so I wonder, I think that market is desperately underserved. The kid market desperately needs content, but you're going to have to hire artists and creators and writers who know that market and will write to that market, and not either view it as slumming it because they're not writing the mature story they really want to write, but actually value those stories and that audience. So when you get there, I think it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's an audience that desperately wants to consume comics, has the money to get it, will get it from their parents, parents looking for things for their kids to do that aren't screen time. There's a million reasons why this is an absolutely amazing market to go chase, but very few people chasing it. So I think the kid market is an interesting one. It's definitely underserved by comics and showing no signs of being served anytime soon. It remains a very awkward set of titles. So I'll give kind of one more example of, if you read comics in the 70s and 80s. Now, the standards of what is kind of acceptable and how those comics read are different today. A lot more got away. You got away with a lot more. I mean, I was a kid watching Rambo and RoboCop and other things that were kind of marketed to me. And today there would be like news stories and outrage and horrifying abuse of children and other things if you tried to show that to your kids. But if you looked at the 70s and 80s, you looked at some of what Marvel was doing, you looked at how G.I. Joe and Transformers were put out, those books were doing an effective job of trying to speak to that audience. and yeah, even Batman Adventures, some of the other titles. I mean, there's a lot out there that used to very effectively talk to that market and then gain lifetime comic fans. I'd be very curious of all the people who read comics out there, the people on talking on social media. How did you start? What was your first comic? What do you remember being attracted to and reading, and why? And I'll bet a lot of people, the gateway was, more kid-based content. And then as they grew up, they started looking at the other things that are advertised in these Marvel and DC comics, and up and out they grew. And they if you catch them at that age and you get somebody who really likes the content being produced, then it's a committed part of your audience for years and years to come. It's like going, putting money into a savings account. If you can then draw upon that interest for years. But that's not a market being served today. So if you're an aspiring creator and you're looking to make some money and you want to, make the best bet you can, kids, absolutely, kid content, kid comics. That is your biggest bang for the buck right now, is making content for that audience, because they need it, they want it, they're not getting it, and you can be smarter than your competition by producing real, honest to goodness kid content friendly for kids, and not falling into the trap of trying to snark to your millennial friends about some kind of wink wink kid joke that's not appropriate for kids. It's just that. Anyway, what do you think? What do you remember from your childhood? What are the titles that you liked and enjoyed? And what would you like to hear me talk more about? I'm here to answer your questions. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Check to make sure you're still a subscriber. People fall on, fall off, or maybe they just abandon. They like this channel sucks. Who knows? Um, tell a friend. Would love to have you, and definitely would love some suggestions. Thanks for listening.